Now I'm going to tell you the story of a political clash you've never heard before. One that might determine whether Democrats ever win Texas again. This isn't Republicans versus Democrats. This isn't left versus right. This is something far more dangerous, a moral reckoning inside the same party, where two rising stars with the same goals are tearing each other apart over how to get there. On one side stands James Talarico, a former public school teacher turned state representative who quotes scripture while fighting for healthcare and unions. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman whose viral takedowns have made her a progressive icon and a media sensation. Both claim to fight for justice, both say they represent the future, but only one can define what that future looks like. And the battle between them reveals a fracture so deep it threatens to split the Democratic Party in two. James Talarico didn't look like a typical politician when he first ran for office in 2018. He was 28 years old, soft-spoken and completely unknown. He had no family money, no political connections, no viral moments to his name. What he had was a classroom. For years, Talarico taught government and economics to high school students in Round Rock, Texas. He watched them struggle with outdated textbooks, overcrowded classrooms, and a state legislature that seemed indifferent to their futures. He saw their parents working 2 jobs and still going bankrupt over medical bills. He saw the gap between what his students deserved and what the system was willing to give them, and he decided to do something about it. His campaign was humble. Door-to-door conversations, town halls in living rooms, no attack ads, no flashy consultants, just a teacher asking his community what they needed and promising to fight for it. He won. And then he did something almost no one in politics does anymore. He kept his promises. Talarico became known for a speaking style that felt out of place in the Texas Capitol. While others screamed and performed for cameras, he spoke with the patience of someone who had spent years explaining the Constitution to teenagers. He cited moral philosophy. He quoted Jesus, not as a culture war weapon, but as a call to serve the poor, heal the sick, and defend the marginalized. His colleagues didn't know what to make of him, but voters did. In a state where Democrats had been losing ground for decades, Talarico's district, once competitive, became solidly blue. He was re-elected easily. His name started appearing on lists of future statewide candidates. People whispered about a Senate run, and that's when the tension began. Jasmine Crockett's rise was nothing like Talarico's. Where he had been methodical, she was explosive. Where he built coalitions quietly, she went viral. A civil rights attorney turned congresswoman, Crockett had made her name with confrontational speeches that lit up social media and cable news. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't soften her language. When Republicans attacked her, she hit back twice as hard, and millions of people cheered. Her most famous moment came during a congressional hearing when a Republican colleague insulted her appearance. Crockett's response was immediate, devastating, and perfectly quotable. Within hours, it had been viewed tens of millions of times. She became a hero to progressives who were tired of Democrats being polite while the other side played dirty. Crockett represented a new style of Democratic politics, unapologetic, combative, and built for the algorithm. She understood that in the modern media landscape, a 30-second clip could do more than a 30-minute policy speech. And she was right. Her influence grew rapidly. She became a sought-after endorsement, a fundraising powerhouse, a voice that could shape narratives. But not everyone was convinced. The conflict didn't start with a debate or a public feud. It started with a question that neither of them could answer the same way. What does it mean to win? For Talarico, winning meant changing hearts. It meant persuading people who disagreed with you, building coalitions across divides, and governing in a way that reflected moral principles, not just political strategy. He believed that if Democrats could show Texans they were fighting for them with integrity and humility, they could turn the state blue. For Crockett, winning meant fighting fire with fire. It meant calling out hypocrisy, refusing to be steamrolled, and energizing the base with the kind of fearless rhetoric that made people feel seen and defended. She believed that trying to win over Republicans was a waste of time. Democrats needed to mobilize their own voters and make the opposition pay a price for their cruelty. On paper, these approaches weren't incompatible, but in practice, they were heading toward a collision. The first public sign came during a panel discussion on the future of Texas Democrats. Talarico spoke about the need for moral courage and meeting people where they are. He talked about faith, service, and the long game. Crockett, speaking later, didn't mention him by name, but the subtext was obvious. "We don't need to beg for respect," she said. "We need to demand it." The room shifted. Some people applauded, others looked uncomfortable, and the whispers began. It wasn't long before the differences became impossible to ignore. Talarico continued to frame his politics in moral and religious terms. He spoke about Jesus more than most Democratic politicians dared to. He argued that Christianity, properly understood, demanded economic justice, health care for all, and care for the least among us. Some people loved it. They saw authenticity, courage, and a way to win back religious voters who had abandoned the party. Others hated it. They accused him of bringing religion into spaces where it didn't belong, of centering Christian language in a diverse coalition, of playing into the idea that Democrats needed to appeal to conservative values. Crockett never said Talarico's name in these critiques, but when she talked about the dangers of respectability politics and the need to center marginalized voices without compromise, it was clear who she was challenging. The tension escalated when a major progressive organization invited both of them to speak at a conference. Talarico gave a speech about the power of moral witness and nonviolent resistance. He quoted Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. He called for a politics rooted in love. The applause was warm but not overwhelming. Crockett followed him. Her speech was sharper, faster, angrier. She talked about the violence of politeness, the failure of incrementalism, and the need to fight back without apology. The crowd erupted. Later that night, clips from both speeches circulated on social media. The comment sections became battlegrounds. Some said Talarico was out of touch. Others said Crockett was too divisive. And for the first time, political insiders started asking the question out loud: can these two visions coexist? Then came the Senate race rumors. Whispers started circulating that Talarico was considering a run for U.S. Senate in the next cycle. If true, it would be a defining moment for Texas Democrats, a chance to put forward a candidate who could appeal to moderates, independents, and even some disaffected Republicans. But it would also be a test. Would the party rally behind a candidate like Talarico, measured, morally driven but potentially too soft for the national stage? Or would they demand someone louder, fiercer, more willing to throw punches? Crockett didn't announce a Senate run. She didn't need to. Her rising national profile made it clear she was being positioned for bigger things. And if Talarico represented one path forward, she represented the opposite. The conflict was no longer theoretical, it was existential. At a private donor event, a major Democratic funder reportedly asked both of them the same question: how do you plan to win Texas? Talarico talked about building trust, one conversation at a time. Crockett talked about making Republicans afraid to cross them. Neither answer was wrong, but they couldn't both be right. The story hasn't ended. The clash between James Talarico and Jasmine Crockett isn't over. It's just beginning, because this isn't really about two politicians. It's about two philosophies of power, two visions of justice, and two incompatible ideas about what it takes to win in a state and a country that feels more divided every day. Talarico believes change comes through moral persuasion. Crockett believes it comes through confrontation. One thinks the answer is love, the other thinks it's fight, and the Democratic Party has to choose. But here's the real question: what if neither of them is enough? What if the future doesn't belong to the preacher or the warrior, but to whoever figures out how to be both? The answer will determine whether Democrats ever win Texas, and whether they can survive each other long enough to find out.